And welcome to Sin and Fin, the Dugout Decision Show.
And I'm very excited to welcome our next very special guest to the show. When you tune into a Blue Jays broadcast and this man speaks, you stop what you're doing and you take note. An absolute baseball guru, a former MLB catcher, and one of the premier analysts for our very own Toronto Blue Jays, with some of the best socks in the business, might I add. It is Mr. Joe Siddall. Welcome to the show, Joe. What a pleasure this is to have you.
Well, those are some strong words, guys. I don't know if I'd go that far. I love baseball. I played a little baseball. I love talking about baseball, as you can tell. And man, am I ever covering a fun team right now, and all of my colleagues, because this country literally exploded during that World Series. It was fantastic, and what a run it was. But it's a pleasure to join you guys.
Absolutely. And we've covered the entire run. I mean, it was incredible 2025 season. We've been watching since we can remember, 5, 6, 8 years old, and watching you on the broadcast pretty much the whole time. So it's been an honor to watch you and really appreciate all the great work you've done. I want to start out right away, though. We're not going to talk too much about football on this podcast. I'll admit, I'm not a football guy. Christian is a Steelers guy. So we're not going to talk about the Steelers game yesterday.
Poor guy.
Yeah, that was a rough game. Joe, I know you're a Lions guy from Windsor, Ontario, obviously. That wasn't a great season, but I know in your past you had some experience with football, right? In high school, and there was some consideration of maybe going to pursue football in college. So you ended up obviously getting through to MLB. Were able to get that home run, which a lot of people cannot say that they got a Major League Baseball home run of Jeff Rosero. Remember that day, August 7th, 1998. So how did that transition happen? And then how has that career, especially as a catcher, because you see so much, helped you in your broadcasting career?
Wow, there's so much detail that I could get into to answer. That could be a whole podcast itself, but I'll try to give you the little revised version. So yeah, I played football in high school. Once I got to high school, I kind of narrowed it down to 3 sports. It was football in the fall, basketball in the winter, and then baseball in the spring and into my summer teams. And love football. Played as a quarterback. And grade 9, you go for football, first time I ever played, and you're kind of on the special teams and defensive back sort of thing. And then it was in grade 10 the next year. At the beginning, the coach tapped me on the shoulder. He said, "I want you to work out with the quarterbacks today." Well, the rest is kind of history, because I went on to play 3 years of senior football. And then I got an offer to play at Central Michigan University, a full ride football scholarship. And I'll never forget, because to this day, I was out on the practice field. It was my last year in high school. And toward the end of practice, and my coach stopped me on the way in. He said, "Let me talk to you for a minute." And I said, "Oh, sure. You don't stop for your coach, right? You have to." And he said, "What would you think if a U.S. college was interested in having you play football there?" And I was kind of like taken aback a little bit. Like, "What are you talking about?" The University of Windsor was literally in our backyard where our high school was. It's right there. I had met with then head coach Gino Fracas back in the day there, and plan was to go to the University of Windsor, probably study human kinetics and play football at the University of Windsor. Just thought it'd be pretty cool after a high school career. So one thing leads to another, and the coaches come over from Central Michigan, and I accepted a full ride football scholarship as a quarterback. But the funnier part is I was a freshman, I was redshirted, so it means you don't play at all. You do everything else. You practice, you're on the scout team, running the other team's plays against your number one defense. Did all that. And the spring rolled around. We had a spring game. It was called the Maroon and Gold game at Central Michigan. I was the quarterback for one team. The other quarterback was a year older than me, and it's because the previous year, my freshman season, it was a senior quarterback that was graduating. So we both played in the game against each other, and I don't think it was anything special. We both did okay, nothing great, but we were probably coming into camp to butt heads and fight for the starting spot. Well, it was spring also, right around the 1st of April, when a call came to my dorm room from the Central Michigan baseball coach asking if I was coming out for baseball. And I was like, "Well, I'd love to come out for the baseball team, but full ride football scholarship, they kind of own you, right? So it's all football, and you kind of got to do what they do. And a month of spring football is pretty important, especially for a young quarterback, a redshirt." So that was kind of a no. And who knows, maybe my junior year, senior year, I might have been able to play baseball. But came home in the summer, got a call from a local expo scout playing here with the Windsor Selects, who I had been for a couple of years. And he said, "We're hosting a local camp. We'd like you to come out and bring a few buddies if you want." So what do you do when you're, I don't know, 18 years old, 19? I said, "Sure." We went out. It was something to do during the day. We probably had a game that night or whatever. Thought nothing of it, let me tell you. So I had a good couple of days, apparently. I hit a couple of home runs, played well behind the plate, threw a couple of guys out stealing. Well, the next call the next day was, "We'd like to sign you to a professional contract." And I didn't really get necessarily what it meant. I was like, "Well, I gotta be at school." This was like late July. I said, "I gotta be at school in 2 weeks. 2-a-day football practices start up, classes start up. Like I can't do that." "Well, no, we'd like to maybe meet with your parents and discuss this a little further." So they came over and they took us to dinner and explained the whole process. And now we're starting to realize, like, this is real. Like, I'd have to give up my scholarship, 4, potentially 5 years of school, my education and all, to pursue a baseball career. So it wasn't easy. Probably took about a week to bounce it off some people, of course, my parents and others, and came up with a decision that, I don't want to say baseball is always my first love, but baseball might have always been my first love. I've always said, too, that whatever was in season was my favorite. But it was an opportunity. I think the deciding factor for me was that if I ever wanted a shot to play professional baseball, this might be it. Like, who knows what happens if I don't take this? Whereas I thought school will always be there. I'll always get my education. I can always go back. That was kind of the basis of my decision. Right or wrong, crazy, not crazy, but you're giving up an awful lot for a shot at a professional baseball career that, as we know, the chances are pretty slim and nil to get to the big leagues. But we're 2 weeks away from going back to school. So I had to call the school to let them know I've made this decision. I call my positions coach. He rails me for about 15, 20 minutes on the phone, what a mistake I'm making. And the chances of getting to the big leagues are slim and none, and you'll never get your education. And I'm just like, ooh, this isn't going very well. He puts me on. He transfers me to our head coach. Same thing for another 15, 20 minutes. And I'm just like, oh, man, I'm like sweating profusely. Like I said, 18, 19 years old, I guess. And what I wanted to say was, I'm not calling to ask your opinion. I'm calling to tell you I've made a decision, right? And then he puts me on the phone with the athletic director of the university. Same thing. So I went through 3 rounds. I took some uppercuts, some jabs, a little bit of everything. And I mean, looking back now, I can laugh because if I was a university official, athletic director or coach, I'd probably treated it the same way, right? Like, I felt bad. There was a part of me that felt bad. And I think it was because I knew and thought that I was letting them down. I mean, you got a guy coming in 2 weeks that could be your starting quarterback, and he's not coming. He's leaving. So it was a tough position to put them in, but I really think I felt selfish. I felt like I was really just doing this for me, and it was all about me. And I don't think that was really my personality, but that's what I was doing. So it was really awkward. It's a tough decision in that regard. Now, I say tough decision. What a nice problem to have, right? But that's how football came to be. And I could give you a lot more details another day, but that's how it came to be. And here we are today. I embark on a professional baseball career today that leads into broadcasting. Life is crazy.
I think it's safe to assume that baseball worked out, eh? I mean, it got you to where you are today, and you were able to break through, obviously, with the Expos, get some time with the Florida Marlins at the time, and then the Detroit Tigers. And then even now through your broadcasting career, you're working along some greats. It's Jamie Campbell's of the world, Caleb Joseph, the legend himself, Buck Martinez. How have you put all the pieces together working with some of those greats and using that playing experience to help in your broadcasting career?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned some of those names because when this first started for me, and I guess how I got into this job in the first place, once again, that's probably another podcast altogether. I have long stories. There's so many details and so many things that went into these life-changing moments for me, I'd like to call them. Yeah. But I worked with Jerry Howarth for the first 4 years on radio. So you think of what a way to break into the business. I had no broadcasting experience whatsoever. The experience I had, it was as a player, and that's why I got hired. Don Collins was the program director at 590 The Fan at the time. And when he eventually selected me, that's what he liked, your experience. He wanted somebody that had played the game. So I paired with Jerry for 4 years. I thought it went superbly, but how fortunate was I to have a mentor like that or a guy next to me in the booth showing me the ropes, because he literally had to early on show me the ropes, like when to come in with your opinions, when to stop, allow me to call the play, all those different little things. And then I was able to dabble in on the TV side because at that time, Pat Tabler was away for a weekend. I might fill in. So I think I was doing 6 or 8, 10, 12 games 1 year, 10 the other, and I filled in, had Buck's calling play-by-play, and I'm doing colors. We had 2 catchers up there. So again, fantastic. And then I slide over to the TV side full-time with Blue Jay Central, and I'm with Jamie Campbell. I mean, arguably the best host in the country, right? I mean, as good as they get. So it was, for me, delving into areas I'd never been before. It was so new. I was so eager to learn and get better. And because, I'm talking baseball. It's what I love to do. And it was a job. It's not a job. We love what we do, right? And so I was able to get mentored by 3 guys like that. And then let's just put a cherry on the top. Now when I'm working in the booth, I'm working with Dan Schulman. I would say now arguably the best in the world at what he does. And you can name the sport, basketball, baseball, doesn't matter. But so I've been very fortunate. I'd like to think I kind of followed their leads because they're so darn good at what they do. And now I've gotten very comfortable, of course, in my own shoes because experience is a wonderful thing. I mean, I'm sure you guys are a lot better than when you first started doing your podcast. Well, I hope I'm a lot better. I'd almost probably not want to listen to some of my early radio broadcasts or my first times on TV, but it was a lot of fun. One memory that stands out, and I have to share this because I think it's important. And it's important for a lot of other people, young people like you in the business. I'll never forget. I'm in the booth, just filling in for Tabby. So it's me and Buck. We're taping our open for the show. And usually it's, minute and a half, 2 minutes there at the top of the show. And sometimes it's pre-taped. Back then we taped it a lot. So we're doing it. Of course, I got my notes. I got my little cue card. I got my points I want to hit on. So he asked me the question. I start talking. And then once it goes to the visuals of what you're seeing, I can cover my points. So I'm looking. Well, I butchered it once. I butchered it the second time. I think the third time I butchered it. And Buck finally, we stopped. And of course, our director's in her ear saying, okay, let's try it again, like your fourth time. And Buck just looked at me and he says, take that paper, roll it up, throw it away, look into that camera and pretend you're talking to your son about baseball. And I kind of went, okay. I did it. I nailed it. And I mean, it's the best lesson I think I've ever learned. So to this day, especially when we're taping our opens or doing different things. And again, I didn't have tons of experience back then, but it was a message that said, baseball, what's going on here. You've got great insight. Just answer the question, just talk, just provide your analysis, just kind of ad lib a little bit more, right? And just be you. And so I think I've really taken that one to heart, and I'll never forget that day, because when you hear that from a guy like Buck, it's like, yes, sir, okay. But it's one of the best things I've ever had, not to mention a million things that Jerry Howarth taught me along the way early on to hopefully help me become a better broadcaster.
Yeah, those are such great lessons from people who've been in the industry forever, and it's a lot easier to say than do. So
Yes.
they could say something, but if I talk into the camera like I'm talking to my son, like that's a lot harder than you think, Buck. Anyways,
Yeah.
you mentioned being signed by the Expos, and I, like so many Canadians, watched the new Expos documentary on Netflix.
Yeah.
And after watching that, and you played with the Expos from 93 to 95, I was wondering, man, it would be a great feeling to have another Canadian MLB team in 2026 or in the near future. Do you think that's a possibility? And where is your ideal spot in Canada, if not for Montreal?
Yeah, that's a great question. I watched the doc as well. Actually, if you watch it closely, I was in it when we were down in spring training. One of those clips are a few guys walking in. Somebody had told me about it, and before I had seen it, so of course I watched for it. But even that's it's kind of funny. It's kind of awkward to think what was and now what is. And I mean,
Yeah.
of course, we'd all love to see baseball back in Montreal. It'd be awesome to have two Canadian teams again. I think the way it is, and maybe I'm saying that as a little biased because I played for the Expos, but where we are right now, too, if you look on the other side, I mean, to be the only team in the country and the Blue Jays being Canada's team, I mean, does it get any better than that? I mean, that is a big, big part, I think, of what the Blue Jays are doing. They have an entire country behind them. Unique, very unique. Players talk about it. Players are feeling it now. They understand this country. I mean, look at the crowd, some of the audiences we had for the television coverage in the postseason, and even during the season when they're in a pennant race. So where is a great question. I mean, I've heard some of the U.S. cities, the Salt Lakes, the Nashvilles that they want to. I mean, we've heard Vancouver a lot of times. We know the minor league team is there. Does Montreal make sense? Well, other people would say, well, they had a team and it didn't work. So why would you go back? I don't know. I think with baseball, I do think there will be two more baseball teams sometime soon, whether that's in the next collective bargaining agreement within the next 4 years? Is it in the next 4 or 5 years? But I think to get it up to 32 teams makes a lot of sense, and maybe then you could play, maybe be a little bit more regional with the time zones and play a truly balanced schedule. I would love that. I do think that'd be a great thing. I like that teams are traveling and you're playing everybody now in baseball. I get that, but it's still not really balanced. I mean, if you're in the AL East like the Blue Jays, I bet they're already signing up. Let's reshuffle this deck a little bit and get out of the AL East, because it wasn't as crazy last year, but I got a feeling it's going to be back to the AL East this year.
Yeah, and when we talked with Jamie Campbell, we talked about the uniqueness of a team being in a separate country, like a team having a separate network like Sportsnet. No other team in the playoffs had their own network broadcasting the playoffs, and that was super cool. And he gave us the background of in 2020. They started broadcasting the Rays Blue Jays wildcard game, and then ever since, Sportsnet has had their playoff broadcast. How cool is that to see Sportsnet have such iconic moments like Hazel May in her interview with Vlad in the ALCS, and so many other moments that are uniquely Sportsnet's?
It was the best. This year was quite a run. When you mentioned 2020 there, going back to the COVID year, right? I did those games, those two Tampa games with Buck. And I would say in the booth, but we were in the studio in Toronto calling those games off a monitor. 2020, those two games, I remember
Wow.
it like yesterday. Yeah. So you talk about going way back. But yeah, where we've come now and being able to broadcast the games. And I mean, for our fans to have Dan and Buck broadcasting the games, they've got, I give a lot of credit to our bosses for what they did. They traveled us out to LA for the World Series. We were all out there. We had a set out in right field, Jamie and I and Madison, and they brought everybody. Pilar's on board, Caleb's there, Hazel. I mean, it was like, here we come. And I don't want to say I thought we did a great job, but I thought the network did a fantastic job at really literally covering all the bases. And the coverage was great. And I mean, you can't ask for a better World Series. I guess it's easy to cover a World Series when you have a series like that or games like that. But very, I think, cool for our audience across this country. The numbers show that our audience appreciated that.
Yeah.
But pretty unique indeed. But it's pretty cool to be part of. From my perspective, pretty awesome to be part of a team that we all feel it's got to be one of the best broadcasts in baseball. I don't look at it that way. We just go and do our job every day. But when we're sitting, if I'm doing Blue Jay Central with Jamie and we're at the desk, I mean, we do our little segment, whatever. When they go down to the field to Hazel or to Arden or to Ben or Shai, all these guys go back up to the booth. I mean, we're watching. I'm watching the monitor and I'm listening because I might refer to something that maybe they said, but going down to the field with Caleb and Kevin, all these different aspects and different angles, it was really cool. And I certainly think our audience appreciated it. There's only one thing that could have gone better. And
Yep.
unfortunately, we didn't have a lot of control over it.
Yep. And honestly, I was just going to get to that because it was such a great World Series, right? As much as we don't want to talk about the heartbreak that happened, it's a rare experience, right? You never are guaranteed that opportunity to be back there. So to have you guys there, to have the entire team there was really special to see. I'm sure that 18 inning game wasn't too fun being there almost the whole night, but aside from that, I'm sure it was a really fun experience.
Interesting you mentioned the 18 inning game. I looked at that as what I thought was going to be a pivotal part of the series. Now, we travel out to LA. There's the workout day and then the 18 inning game. But
Yeah.
you can imagine, of course, we're getting a little bit older, but there's a jet lag. Jet lag's real, right? There's a 3 hour time change. You're
Yeah.
even as a player, I remember when I was younger, feeling it the next day and traveling and going places. Not necessarily when you arrive, right? You've got that, everybody's kind of pumped a little bit. But then the second day, you kind of hit that wall. Well, second day there. And I don't know about the players, but I was hitting the wall. I'm on the set in right field at Dodger Stadium, and it's the 12th inning, and it's the 14th inning, and it's the 16th inning. And, if I've said to people, if it was June, I would say, I don't care who wins this game. Let's just get it over
Yep.
with so we can get back to the hotel and get to bed because I'm tired. I'm fading here. I was hoping for anything to happen. A ball to go through the legs of a Dodgers infielder, a Dodgers outfielder misjudge a fly ball, something. Just have the Blue Jays score anyway so they can secure this game. I thought it was so critical. And the way it went down by losing in 18 innings, I truly felt you can't come back from this. You can't come back from this. And what did
Yeah.
they do? They did it again. They win the next two games. Like they just kept doing it all season long. Every time I doubted them, they just keep punching me in the face. And it was remarkable. So it was a great run. But as soon as you said that 18 inning, I thought that was it. They were done,
Yeah.
and they weren't done at all.
Oh, I mean, it felt like it, right? I remember watching that
Yeah,
game until I think 3 a.m. Eastern is still up. And then,
right.
of course, the walk-off happens. But with the fans, too, again, you mentioned how there were so many fans across the country. And I remember even when we had Jamie Campbell on, he mentioned that he came across a family from Nepal that was all of a sudden
Wow.
falling in love with the Blue Jays. I thought, wow, like that's quite amazing. We're getting real worldwide fandom now here for
Yes.
the Jays. So obviously we got a lot of the bandwagoners, a lot of the people coming from around the world, and then a lot of people also that are obviously the diehards that have stuck with the team through all the rough patches and the good patches. So in your broadcast, you're using a lot of analytics. Obviously, you're breaking down player swings, player performances, using statistics. How do you find the balance in there so that it's not too overwhelming for maybe those people that aren't too familiar with what you're talking about, but the diehards still
Yeah.
get all the information that they want?
Yeah, I don't personally dig into the weeds into the analytics a whole lot when I'm talking or when I'm demonstrating. I like to talk about the swing or the infielder or the catcher or what they're doing physically on the field and trying to bring you, the audience, into a player's shoes, what they're going through and what a catcher was thinking here when he went to his right to block a ball or what a hitter was thinking with his move to the baseball, with his swing path. So I don't necessarily get too deep into the weeds. I leave it for our producers or some of the directors. Maybe they want to touch it. You'll see on the broadcast we'll have some numbers that come up and we'll show WAR, we'll show WRC plus on occasion. And I think our broadcast does a nice job of just mixing them in on occasion. And I think Dan does a fantastic job at, if it's WRC plus or one of those, maybe give them a quick little, or OPS plus, what exactly that is for your average audience that maybe isn't into what OPS plus is or something like that. So you kind of keep it simple. I don't delve too much. I kind of stay with some of the old school fundamental numbers. Now, do I believe that analytics and data are important? Absolutely. The way I think a lot of old former players like me get, I shouldn't say they get the bad rap. A lot of them get a bad rap because they speak so negatively about it. But I think what happens is, I'll be the first to admit, way back, we had analytics too. It's just it wasn't near what can be measured now. The
Yeah.
analytics, the data, the info that we had when I played before a series, I knew what hitters' strengths and weaknesses were. I knew if they could handle the ball in. I knew what they would do with two strikes, where they're susceptible. Do they like swinging at the first pitch? Do all these different little tendencies and different things about their swings? We'd watch some little video on hitters and show how this guy couldn't handle the off-speed pitch away or whatever the case was. So that all went right here, and you had to kind of remember all that when you went over your pregame meeting with your starting pitcher, and then you would take that into the game. Well, now it's the same thing, except multiply it by a bazillion, right? With all of the heat maps and all of the different data from the exit velocities and where you go, the cold map and heat map, where you go with two strikes and what you do. So all of that stuff is fantastic information. I just think, to me, a lot of the analytics in today's game is probably best suited for teams, whether you're acquiring players or that sort of thing, when you're looking at bat speed and exit velocities and all that stuff. I mean, I don't really care about that stuff right now when I'm in a game trying to call a game, but I do want to know what a hitter strength and weakness is, what my pitcher strength and weakness is. So I would say personally, I don't delve all of that. I like to leave that to the Arden Dwellings of the world. They really know how to get into that. They understand it. Some of our producers do as well. So I like to kind of keep it for I don't want to say the average audience, but a lot of the fans we have probably have a little understanding of the game, might not know all the intricacies. What I want to do is bring them into the minutiae of the game, the intricacies of the game. What am I as a catcher thinking right there? Why did a hitter swing at that pitch and not the pitch before? So I like to explain. I mean, that's where, when you talk about experience, I mean, as a catcher, to me, I like to bring a lot of that into the broadcast, because pitch selection, sequencing pitches, why you throw this pitch before that one, how you got to think ahead. All of those things are the things that I think I bring to the broadcast that entertains our audience or helps them learn. And I get a lot of people that'll say that. I love the way you talk about the sequences, or I love the way you explain things so that the average fan can understand. Because you have to remember, you're talking to a lot of people that are watching the game for the first time. You're talking to a lot of people that understand the game a little bit, but maybe not all the details. And then you're talking to a lot of people that really understand it. So you don't want to talk down to anybody. You don't want to talk too far up to. So you try to strike that balance, and hope you do that. There are times that you do have to go into a little bit more detail. And if that's too much for some people, that's okay. But I don't want to be getting into the numbers part of the game and losing people, because number one, it's not my strength. I'm not going to delve in to try to understand them all. Do I think a lot of them are all valuable? At times, absolutely. I mean, information, if you're turning down information, you're just not being very smart.
Yeah, for sure. And coming from a guy who loves analytics, and I want to pursue a career in analytics or in a front office, my dad isn't on the analytics side. He's more of like, what's going on here? We got all
Yeah.
these resources, but he loves the way that you go over everything. And as you said, just blend the old game with the new game and just have a good mix of that. So my dad's one of your biggest fans. Just
There you
wanted to say
go.
that. And
All right.
there's a lot more resources. Like the Traject machine was made out in Waterloo, Ontario,
Yeah.
which is an insane resource. Like imagine facing Randy Johnson back in 1993 on the Traject machine. I'm sure that would have helped a little bit. But there's also a lot more. Like PitchCom, that's a controversial thing. There's a bunch of PitchCom stoppages each game. And also next year, the ABS system. What do you think about the ABS system? How does that affect catchers? Because that'll be a big thing. And in spring training, we saw Alejandro Kirk go almost 100% on his ABS challenges.
He
So
was unbelievable.
well, he was unbelievable. So what do you think about the ABS system next year, and how does that affect today's game?
Well, I've wavered on it. I'll be honest with you. I was that old school guy that didn't want anything to do with it. But the main reason, was because as a catcher, it's almost like a middle infielder that can really turn a double play. And then there are some middle infielders that don't necessarily have great footwork and aren't great at turning a double play. Well, when they took that slide out, to me, you're taking a skill that's advantageous to somebody like some second baseman or some shortstops. Now you're taking that away from them. And I don't think that's fair. I think when you have those skills, you should benefit by them. So same as a catcher, if you're such a great receiver and can frame pitches and get calls, and now you go to the ABS, you're taking that away from an Alejandro Kirk. That's his bread and butter. That's what makes him so valuable. But I also understand watching games just like you and every fan in the world, when you see these calls that are so egregiously wrong, it's like, oh man, are you telling me that I'm actually coming around on this? Because that's kind of where I'm at. So then when the challenge system was in spring training last year, I was kind of like, okay, I like this. It was pretty cool. I was buying in. The only problem is it's almost like instant replay, right? Sure, it's great to have instant replay because what's the purpose? To get the call right. We still don't get every call right because you might be out of challenges or some things you can't challenge. So, I mean, it's like, I get it. It's better that it's there, but like, let's say it's 3 challenges you get with the ABS system, and or whatever, 2 or 3, whatever, you run out of them by the 7th inning. Well, now in the 8th or 9th inning, when you have the most critical call in the game, you can't do it. Like, to me, it's either got to be almost all in or not. And I understand that with replay, the reason you can't challenge everything is because they don't want to stop the game every other play to challenge something. So it's a delicate issue, and I go back to, like, I understand this game. I don't want to say it's the old cliche of the games played by humans. There's human error. Like, we all know that, but I hope they don't go down that avenue too far. PitchCom has done it. I mean, to me, stealing signs got so crazy, of course, and they're planting people in stands and they've got hidden cameras and all these other things, and then they start banging garbage cans. But like, to me, again, I took a lot of pride in the fact that my pitch sequences with my fingers and working with my pitchers, like that's this right here. And to me, we can't take this out of the game. I think this is the most important tool between a player's ears, along with all of the other tools it requires to play this game. So I'm not going full on onto all this stuff, and I'm afraid at times that where we might end up going from PitchCom to ABS and instant replay, it's just becoming so automatic. And I get it. It's 2026 now. We have all that technology. So I do get it, but I just still cringe a little bit because I feel like so much should still be on the players. In fact, I'll go a step further. We talk about the iPads and all that stuff. I would love, hey, use every bit of data or tech that you want to prepare for a series, prepare for a game. But at 7:00, gone. Go play baseball. Now you got to rely on this, your notes. So that's just where I'm at. And I don't know if there's a happy medium because, as we see, there is going to be something every year that you can pick at. But I do think the game is in a great place right now. And I certainly hope there's no stoppages at all because they got a good thing going.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned that's the bread and butter for someone like Alejandro Kirk, right? He's so great at that. Look at the impact. And just for the people that aren't aware of the numbers, 5 home runs he put up in the playoffs with an 842 OPS, plus what he added defensively as well. And there were some great catchers in the playoffs, right? Look at Cal Raleigh, obviously, who nearly won the MVP for the Mariners, Will Smith on the Dodgers. Something I noticed, though, in the playoffs, looking specifically at the defensive impact they had, I can only imagine how grueling it is to go through a playoffs. And obviously these players are tired, but I didn't see once, it might have happened a couple times, but honestly, I didn't see, and I was watching every inning of every game, Alejandro Kirk boot a ball behind home plate. Whereas you saw these other guys who are amazing catchers, top in the league, and yet they'd have occasions where a ball might go through their legs and that advances a runner. And now you get a base hit and the runner scores. That didn't happen with Alejandro Kirk. I really didn't see that happen. He can throw out runners, has that incredible offensive impact. Remember, game 162, hits a couple of home runs, it's a grand
Yeah.
slam. That was incredible to watch. So, what's your sort of breakdown of Alejandro Kirk and his impact in 2025? And can he continue that?
I am totally impressed slash totally shocked with the way we're talking about Alejandro Kirk right now compared to when he first broke in. So he was a guy that I had heard that he came up and he had good bat to ball skills, good eye, good knowledge of the strikes and all those things, but also good hands behind the plate. And he got into the one knee style. He was just a more of his comfort thing. I've talked to Luis Hurtado a lot about that, the bullpen coach who works with Kirk a lot. And it works really well for him. And I think a big part of it is because he's got great hands. And I mean, 30 plus years ago when I was playing, that's the ultimate compliment you can get. You're quiet back there. You got great hands. You give the umpire a good look. Well, now, of course, with the one knee and the way they pull the ball up, the way you'll see his glove go down and the way he pulls the ball up into the zone. And it's not just up, it's also from the sides. And he pulls it in, even the top pitch. He's really almost mastered all those areas of the zone, some better than others. But what he does in the bottom of the zone is just spectacular. And I'm still a little bit surprised that umpires buy a lot of the calls that catches, because you see, look across the game, some guys are lifting their glove like 2 feet. It's kind of crazy, actually. Like, I think it's just way too egregious. But Alejandro, I call him soft hands, but he's just got great hands, the way he receives that ball and pulls it into the zone. And it is a big strength of his. I think the one thing with Alejandro that we continue to talk about, and it started in spring training this year, we were in Dunedin and John Schneider was asked how many games that he anticipated Kirk catching. And he said, I think he can start 150 and 120 games. I think that was his quote. And I remember standing in the Strum going, whoa, he didn't even start 100 games the year before. How are you going to go to that? But he was down in Florida. He was working out, getting himself into his best shape possible. And I was still doubting that number. And I asked Alejandro, I went into his locker later in the day and I asked him the same question. He gave the same answer. So clearly this was discussed. And I said, really? 115, 120? He said, yeah. I said, okay, well, we'll see. But that's a big load these days for a catcher. And of course, you're hoping that the bat comes back, right? If you go back to spring training, he had a rough year the year before, we're a rough couple of years after a Silver Slugger season. And he was great all season, really good, really good. Kind of hit the wall a little bit there where the arm started fading on his throws a little bit. He was kind of feeling it. Offensively, I think bottom line is when you're, as a catcher, when you start feeling it, it's the bottom half. And then everybody knows as a hitter, when you lose your legs, you lose your bottom half, you start using your upper body more and you start pulling and you start doing things hitters don't want to do. So he did hit a wall there. I remember talking to John Schneider about it. They watched him for a little bit, kind of guarded his playing time for a little bit. Heineman came in a little bit more and he got his second wind, if you want to call it a second wind or a reboot, whatever it was. Then, of course, postseason, maybe the adrenaline kicks in, but that's something that they'll have to watch for. I think whatever I remember his Silver Slugger season, he was hitting so well that when he wasn't catching, he was DHing. So
Yeah.
that was back when Jano was here. So he's not catching as much, DHing too. So really valuable. But now with what he does behind the plate, you want him back there every day.
Yeah,
So it's also nice that you have a solid veteran backup in Tyler Heineman
for
when
sure.
Kirk's not there. And it's a nice security blanket to have if Schneider says, hey, let's give him a couple days here just to reboot and maybe rest up.
Yeah.
So, yeah, he's amazing. He is more than I ever thought he would be. I was wrong early on. I didn't love his style, but now what I think is in that style, it suits him about as perfectly as any catcher I've seen.
Yeah, and since they've shifted to the early 2020s and it became the Vladdy era, he's been one of the core pieces, right? He's been there since 2020, 21. It's guys like Springer, guys like Vladdy, guys like Kirk. Gosman's been there for a while. So he's been one of the cornerstone pieces. There's been some changeover, but Kirk has consistently been there. Now, obviously, again, as I just said, it's been the Vlad era, obviously, right? He's here for another 14 years. I'm curious what changed because he didn't have a bad offensive season in the regular season. Certainly wasn't up to his standard of the 2021 year, and he hasn't been able to replicate that yet. But the playoff run, man, that playoff run, I don't know what sort of switch he turned on. Was it purely adrenaline? I don't know what it was. The grand slam that he hit. It was a sight to see, to be there throughout the entire playoffs. 8 home runs that he put up. He's breaking all kinds of records. What sort of shift did he make? And then how can he extrapolate that over a full season of production going forward? Because we have him for 14 years. If he does that only the playoffs, I'll take it. But it would be nice if he could do in the regular season as well.
Yeah, he's a funny one because I think we'd all agree that when Vladdy is like at his best, he is on another level. He's on another planet. His teammates will tell you that.
Yeah.
Players around the league will tell you that. And I've said that back a few years ago when he was doing some things. It's like he can do things other guys can't. Like the ball just comes off the bat differently. I think his swing is unique in that, though, too, because he can do so many things. Like he's more to me of a line drive type hitter. But when he catches it right, just up front a little bit, he's catching that swing on the upswing a little bit. And now it's a little bit more of a line, more than a line drive. It's more in the air and into the seats because
Yeah.
he's got tremendous power. But it's almost like, and I'm not going to get too much into the weeds of hitting and swing pass right now, but he's got more of a down, working down to the ball type swing than most guys. And I think sometimes when he's not right, the moves, he's got a lot going on, right? He's got a little check step, the hands come down, his hands come back up, he goes forward. Like when you have a lot of moves, I remember when Gurriel was here, Lourdes Gurriel. I thought Lourdes Gurriel was a really good hitter because when
Yeah.
he was right, oh man, he could carry the team. But he was that tall, lanky guy, longer limbs though. When he wasn't right, man, does it get ugly. Like big guys will tell you that too. There's just a lot to maneuver. Now, any hitter will tell you that, but especially the longer levered guys like a Gurriel. But with Vladdy, there's so much movement going on that when he's rushing it, if that timing with his check steps off and the hands coming down, then he's jumping out. When you're jumping out, there's no way now you can really kind of work behind the ball very well. He's at his best when he's slow, he's early, and he's on time. And I mean, any hitter will tell you that. But when you're Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and you have those things, you can do things other guys can't. And that's line drive singles, it's line drive doubles, and it's line drive kind of just missile like home runs. Like he just the bat speed he creates is remarkable. Now the question, as you just said, do it all year then? Why don't you do it
Yeah.
all year? Well, I would say like a lot of former players like say because baseball's hard, hitting's hard, but because he's on such another level, you expect more, right? So when you see that, like I have for how many years now, I expect it more. Like I know what you can do. He should be at that ceiling more, right? But sometimes you're trying things, and I mean, he's also a human being. So as a hitter, anybody will tell you when things aren't right and you're fighting something and you're trying to correct it, man, you can feel like you've never hit before. I mean, I would work for the Tigers for years after my playing career, and I was in the batting cage with some pretty darn good hitters. You know, the Magli Ordonez's of the world, Carlos Guillen and Miguel Cabrera and all of these guys. And I remember Miguel Cabrera. I mean, this is one of the better hitters that's ever lived. I remember being in the cage, flipping him soft toss one day, and Lloyd McClendon was the hitting coach, and he's behind him, and I'm flipping him, and he's just not right. And he was going through it at the time, a little bit of a slump. And he finally stopped. He's like, McClendon, I don't know how to hit. What am I doing wrong? And it's like, this was the greatest hitter on the planet, basically saying, I'm lost right now. So it happens. It happens. Now, I've always said the best ones are the good ones. They figure it out more. They figure it out sooner. It doesn't take them 3 weeks or 4 weeks to figure it out. They usually do it in a week. But he's a special talent. One would think he will have, then you learn as you continue to learn as you go, but hopefully he's got some cues that make him right. Because the biggest one for me was he really gets out there forward. And when you get there forward as a hitter, you can be in big trouble. I know a lot of people talk about transferring weight, but you still got to stay behind the baseball. And some people get out too far. Some people don't get out enough and they get stuck in the back. So it's different for everybody. Everybody's bodies move differently. That's why everybody's swing planes are different. And Vladdy is so unique because when it's all working, he's as good as there is. So hopefully we see it for 6 or 7 months instead of just a few months.
Yeah, and there were plenty of other players on the Jays that ticked it up in the playoffs. Think of Addison Barger, who had a rough September and
Yeah.
August, and Ernie Clement with the most hits ever in a postseason, just legendary performances. And in both of those players, I've heard swing adjustments in the playoffs. I think it was Addison Barger in Seattle. Popkins, it's like lower your hands, and then he did it, hit a home run, huge home run. And then same thing with Ernie Clement, where he made a swing adjustment. Can you measure the importance of David Popkins and Lou Ionati's addition last year and how that affected the Blue Jays and all their hitters?
Yeah, there's David, there's Lou, and then Hunter Ments got hired away to the
That's
San
right.
Francisco
That's right.
Giants. So these three guys were pretty special. And I don't like talking too much about hitting coaches because if the team's not hitting, I'm not going to sit here and say the hitting coaches don't know what they're talking about. And if they're really hitting, I'm not going to say it's because of the hitting coaches because I don't think they're to blame. So I don't want to give too much credit. But when you see a team like this year and so many hitters up and down the roster that blossomed, like they're almost to a man, they all were kind of at the peak of their offensive prowess, probably. Like, that's unbelievable. Like, it's crazy that you can do that with so many people. And whether that's an Ernie Clement and simplifying things to get him to do this, whether that's David Schneider and, hey, let's take this away. Let's focus on this area of the zone. This is your strength. You do this. And I think each one is a different project. And as I was talking about Vladdy, they're like, everybody's bodies are different. They move differently. The swing paths are different. And that's why they got to work with what's best for them. And I think that's kind of their MO. Identify what you do best and work at that. Now, that doesn't mean just don't swing at a pitch high in the zone, because you can say that all you want. But you know what those pitches high in the zone look like? They look like they're good hitting. They're just not most of the time. But that's why I think what their ability to get to each individual was probably what was most special. I think like a Barger, when you mentioned Barger, he struggled toward the end there. I remember seeing him, I think it was in September, and they were taking BP at home. I was on the field there, and I saw him by the on-deck circle. And I said, how are you hanging? Because I knew he was scuffling. And you can see when a guy's body fatigue shows for me in a hitter, because the moves just aren't quite the same. They're not as crisp. You start expanding the zone a little bit. You start trying to do too much because you know it's the bat speed or the swing's not there. And I was seeing that. So I said, how you hanging there, kid? And he's like, oh. I said, long season. And he's like, dude, I've never played this much baseball in my life. So those things are real. And maybe you don't want to hear that because he shouldn't be saying those things. Well, no, what's one thing I love about Addison Barger? He'll tell you what he's thinking, and it's awesome. Like, he is great in that regard. But you know what he did? He kept pounding the pavement and working his tail off. And guess what he did? Found a little second wind, didn't he? Which is great. And Ernie's another story because, you know, I don't think anybody would see Ernie as one of the better hitters in the game. He's not like he's an 850 OPS guy. Like, he does some special things. But, man, when you go on a run like that, that was unbelievable. And to think that's the name now at the top of the list in Major League Baseball's postseason history for hits, Ernie Clement, really? So pretty awesome. And it couldn't be a better guy holding that record, because there's a guy, too. You want to talk about keeping it simple, man. He must just have the best hand-eye and athleticism there is, because I think he just lives on that. And that's what it looks like. You're going up against him, the athlete, and he's going to compete his tail off against you.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why it was so special to see all these players come together and have such historic performances. You were obviously there. We've mentioned this already. You were there for every single game, seeing the players go through it. What was the whole experience like, trying to capture those 7 games that you had watching the Jays, in the entire experience you've had covering the Jays, playing whatever it is you've seen, because you've seen a lot of baseball, obviously, in your life. Where does this World Series rank in terms of pure baseball experience as a broadcaster, maybe even just as a fan?
Yeah, I think it's got to be at the top because there's the World Series. I started radio in 14, so I had the 15 and 16 runs postseason on the radio, bat flip game, the whole bit. I mean, that was still probably the highlight of my broadcasting career, I say, because the highlight of my broadcasting career, I didn't talk. So that's what I like to tell people. It was the Jose Bautista bat flip. And I think Jerry Howarth and I went silent for close to a minute. And just, they were big. And Tom Young was our producer and our engineer. They loved to bring the sounds of the stadium into the radio waves and let the audience hear it. And it was booming, as you can remember. But then it was the last few postseason runs. I mean, the Blue Jays have had some good teams, but got there at 0-6, right? 2 and out every time, 3 straight times. So this time, it almost caught me, not by surprise, but like, okay, you got the division series against the Yankees. They handled them. You go to the ALCS. Well, they've been there before, but maybe not playing that wild card. It just seems like, got to the ALCS pretty fast. So here's the ALCS, and then George hits the homer, and they win that series. They're going to the World Series, and I think I had to say that out loud a few times. They're going to the World Series. Like, they're going to the World Series. And if you'd asked me in spring training, like, no chance. So it's the way, to me, it was the way they did it and the way this season went. And as we talked about all those hitters and all the different contributions, I mean, you can name any hitter right now, and we could probably flip back to the pages of the scorebooks and see how they won a game for them, whether it's Heineman or Clement or Schneider, doesn't matter, Jimenez, everybody like won. They didn't just like perform well at times. They won games for them at times. So I've never seen a team like that. I played for Felipe Alou at the West Palm Beach Expos in 1990. And we had a team, not like this, but a team that wasn't expected to do real well, like this 2025 Blue Jays team. And we joked coming out of spring training that they sent all the suspects to West Palm Beach High A ball in Florida State League. The better players went to the higher draft picks went to Middle A Rockford, Illinois, and then Double A Jacksonville. So this was just almost a bunch of scrubs. Well, we won like 94 games, went to the
Wow.
playoffs, lost in the championship to the Vero Beach Dodgers, to Mike Piazza and Dina Weeble and Eric Young Sr. But there was a team, this team kind of reminded me of that. Now, this is a totally different level. And there are some superstars, of course, on this Blue Jays team, but I didn't see an offense performing the way it performed. We know they play great defense. Pitching can generally hold their own, but the offense and what they did, that to me was the most remarkable thing. So as you get into the World Series and then going out to LA, I think that's when it really hit home that like that was pretty cool for us. If I'm working in the booth with Dan during the season, right, we travel. But if not, we stay home in the studio in Toronto and do our pre and post game show from there, Blue Jay Central. But to take our set, and we were in LA, and to be there, that to me was like the not the aha moment, but now it really felt like the World Series. Not only the World Series, but it's Dodger Stadium. Like, does it get any better?
Yeah.
Dodger Stadium, Blue Jays are in the World Series. I just keep saying it to myself. So that's why I think this one was the most special of all. And then even though it didn't end right, it's probably going to be one of the more memorable World Series for a lot of baseball fans, let alone somebody that gets the
Yeah.
broadcast of the games. And I mean, we have a little group chat going, and we'll talk in the off season. It was late into November, and a lot of us were just like still just kind of coming down from it, like wow. And our poor friend Dan Schulman, he's got to go do college basketball right when he's done. So I don't know if he had any time to relax,
Oh
but
my goodness.
but
Well,
yeah, it was. We talked about it though. It was such an emotional month of baseball.
yeah, and I'll admit I'm pretty optimistic, but there was some skepticism there. You're right, especially until we referenced a lot on this podcast. I know you have as well in other interviews that Bo home run in May, right? That really
Yeah,
shifted the momentum. That was a big moment. But just looking at this core of the team, there's been somewhat of a change. When you look at the 2021-22 teams, that was such an offensive heavy team. Vlad's going off. They had Marcus Semien, George Springer was having incredible years. It was very offensive heavy, and they had some success. Obviously, it didn't work in the postseason. So they shifted in 2023. Obviously, it's a complete defensive mindset. Kevin Kiermaier comes in, Dalton Varsho comes in. The offense starts to struggle. So do you feel like this is the first year we got to see sort of a combination of the two and sort of it mesh? There's the offensive output, but then also the defensive ability was there. It just kind of felt like everything came together this past year.
yeah, and you've mentioned the word defense there a couple of times, right? Like they've really put an emphasis
Yeah.
on the defense, and I mean when your offense isn't the best, like coming out of 2024, I don't want to hear anything more about run prevention and defense. It's like score more runs. Like that's
Yep.
that's the best defense you've got. Now I'm not saying I'm right, but that's how I feel. And I felt like they needed a big bat, and they got Santander, and that's great. You hope he's going to come and hit 40 homers and really help that offense. Because at that point, I was kind of adamant that they got to hit more homers, right? You got to hit home runs in the postseason. That's how you win and all. But they just did it a different way. They didn't get much from Santander at all, but they got a lot more from other guys. Like who I wasn't going to predict that George Springer and Alejandro Kirk were going to have rebound years
Yeah.
like they did. And I remember saying in spring training, those two guys are probably two of the culprits of 2024, right? They need to turn around if this offense is going to do anything. And did they ever turn it around, right? And especially George with his season. So contribution. And then Bo, I expected Bo to be better. I thought 24 was whatever. I don't know what happened. It was an aberration. I thought Bo would be Bo again, and he was. So, and Vladdy was Vladdy. So things really worked. Because I'm a big fan of saying that your best players have to be your best players. But I think what we learned from the Blue Jays this year, that's true. But man, when you get contributions from the complementary pieces, and I hate to call them complementary pieces, but somebody has to hit 6, 7, 8, 9. But how many post games did we talk about the bottom of the Blue Jays order? It seemed like it was a lot throughout the course of the season.
Yeah, part of the World Series loss hurting, in my opinion, was just the randomness of the season. I mean, there was a Nathan Lucas hitting in the two hole for the majority of the World Series and hitting well. I think he had 8 hits in all the World Series. And Miles Straw is the glue guy. Like, who would have thought that when he got traded for when he came back with international bonus money, thinking that we were going to get Roki Sasaki in the offseason before. So that was part of why it hurt so much. And then you look at, okay, but we got free agency. We haven't had much luck in free agency in recent years. I mean, we've been in Soto conversations, rumors, whatever, Otani rumors, Sasaki. There's been a lot of it. And then you start this offseason off with signing Dylan Cease to a 7-year contract, and then you do so much more. Tyler Rogers, Cody Ponce, Kazuma Okamoto, who they signed last week. Man, this is like a legendary offseason for Rogers Communications, but also baseball and baseball in Canada. What do you think about the offseason so far for the Jays?
Well, I'm glad you said Rogers Communications because if you're a Blue Jays fan, don't you be talking bad about ownership now.
Nope, never.
Baseball sports fans everywhere oftentimes will use that, right? And they'll blame ownership for not spending money or doing this or making poor decisions, whatever the case may be. But one thing that this ownership has done is they've spent money and they've opened up the books, and that's wow. If you're a fan, you have got to be thrilled. I'm shocked. I didn't know that they were going down this road. If you would have asked me a few years ago, I would have thought they're always going to be that kind of middling, maybe top 10-ish payroll in baseball. But wow, this is pretty awesome to come as close as they did. But and I remember I think it was post game, even after game 7, we talked about how like business starts right now for next season. And this team, it's just the nature of the business, it's not going to be the same. There are guys that are free agents that won't be back. That's just the way it works. Some guys will be released or whatever. The core might be back, but there will be different names and faces. And sure enough, there will be. And thanks to ownership, some pretty good players. And I mean, the way they went out and got Cease, I think a lot of people, including myself, we're shocked that Cease signed so quickly. But as I tell people, he had 210 million reasons to sign so quickly. But again, what that is though, that's ownership, and that's the Blue Jays. First of all, the baseball ops saying, target a guy. This is the guy we want. This guy, and ownership said, okay, go get him then. Look, that's pretty nice. So when you do that, you fill such a huge hole because you knew that they'd have to focus on starting pitching because Gosman's now going into his last year. Scherzer, Bassett, both free agents. Like you've got to watch for that turnover and prepare for the future. So as we sit here today, you got Dylan Cease to lead this rotation for the next several years. Hopefully, Savage is a big part of that. Maybe Cody Ponce is a part of that. Maybe somebody else signs or they make a deal in the near future. So you've got to think about that's the way they've done it, right? I mean, think going back to getting Ryu. It's been Ryu. It was extending Barrios. It was Gosman, Bassett. So they've really built this rotation on veteran-laden guys that are durable, give you innings. I mean, I know Cease might not give you tons of innings sometimes, but you hope that durability is there to give you 30-plus starts a year because it's so important. I mean, talking to Bass and Scherzer, some of those guys about that, it's so critical to give your team all 30-plus starts because anytime we know, right, we've seen it, anytime you have to start plugging guys in, it's like, uh-oh. And anytime you're not going deep as a starter, it's like, uh-oh, because that means going to the pen sooner. Well, you go to the pen sooner like the Blue Jays had to early this season, you crush those guys. And I thought a lot of them were pretty crushed later in the season because of the work and the things they were called upon to do earlier in the year.
Yeah, as a Jays fan, I'm feeling kind of greedy right now because our last few podcast episodes have just been about we're going to get Kyle Tucker, we're going to get Bo Bichette, and we've spent like $150 million so far. So what's
Yeah.
wrong with that? But I mean, it would be bad if we didn't talk about Bo Bichette or Kyle Tucker. They're both two great fits with the Toronto Blue Jays and how they are right now. Do you think either of them signs, and which one with the Blue Jays?
It's really it's interesting. I read a lot. I don't get too caught up in stuff because I'm not a reporter. I don't really like reading the make believe stuff, right? I mean, you read tons of stuff and some of it can be true, some not. So I don't get too caught up in it. But if you told me Bichette or Kyle Tucker was going to hit in the 2-hole this year, wow. I mean, with what they've done, that lineup is impeccable. Without it, changes things a little bit, right? Does that mean Barger's up in the 2-hole? I don't love that. I love Addison Barger, but I also love leaving him down where he can continue to hone his craft and become a big league hitter because I think he's got a chance to be an everyday big league player. Now I know sometimes the struggles against left-handers, he might be more of a platoon guy, but I would like to see more from him, but maybe lower in the order. So I don't want to necessarily put the heat on him by moving him up into the 2-hole on a team that's basically now expected to win the AL East, right? So that's why I would love one of those two other guys. Of course, Tucker, so many good things he does with that bat, especially from the left side. You would think maybe he's the one that goes first, and once he goes, then Bo lands to one of the other suitors. With Madeley going to Philly, I thought that was almost going to be a bit of a match made in heaven for Bo. They spend. They're a good team. Can you imagine Bo Bichette in the lineup there with Kyle
Oof.
Schwarber and company and Harper. Like,
Wow.
wow, right? Yeah. But yeah, I mean, everybody would love to have one of those two, but that's the reason I'd love to have one of those two is for that 2 hole, because this to me is a year that you're obviously in it to win it again. And George Springer's got one more year. So you slowly got to start thinking about the future, maybe not just yet, but in terms of that leadoff spot. And maybe that's by
Yeah.
way of trade or something in the future.
Yeah, and Dalton Varshall's also going into his walk year, which we've mentioned on this podcast as well.
Mm-hmm.
I'll admit, I'm a Bo truther. I guess it's that emotional attachment I've always had to him. I don't know. I always had the longer hair and kids thought I look like him, so I always had that. But look, Kyle Tucker's a great player, MVP
Yeah.
candidate, right? Multiple times. So if they're able to get one of the two, that would be great. The roster's already quite solid as it is. Obviously, with Okamoto, there's some serious upside there. We'll see how it translates into the MLB. It's surreal to think, though, that we're about a month away from pitchers and catchers reporting. Spring training is on the horizon. So if I look back to last spring training, I think of a guy like Alan Roden, who was one of the best players in spring training. I think put up a 1,200 OPS. And I'd hate to put any bad juju on any players here, but obviously it didn't go great for Alan Roden in 2025. But is there anyone you're looking out for in spring training? Maybe it's a prospect. We're very high on Ricky Tiedemann on this in this podcast. Is it a prospect? Is it one of the new signings? Someone you're looking out for to make an impact and make a good first impression in spring training?
Funny you mentioned Alan Roden's name, because I'll be the first to raise my hand doing some games. And he was the name that I used to say, watch for this guy. Like, I loved what he was doing in spring training. I honestly think he changed some things when the season started. I thought his swing changed. He got really jumpy. And that's, I think, a key part that some people may not understand. Here's a young guy coming in spring training, and sure, the heat's on, right? You want to impress, but he really did a nice job. He did everything he had to do. And then once the season started, I saw a guy that, whoa, maybe the big leagues caught up to him a little bit, and he just sped up everything. And it's easy to do as a hitter, because and when you speed up as a hitter, he was jumping out at the pitcher, almost like when I talk about some of those fundamentals of working behind the ball and not getting too far out front. I just thought he looked like a different hitter. I'm like, wait a minute, this isn't the guy that I said is going to have a great season. It's like he changed. So looking forward to this spring. I've said his name a bunch of times already, man. I am on the Addison Barger train. Like, and I know
Okay.
it's an easy pick, but I'm talking about homegrown, left-handed power hitter. I prefer him in right field. Leave him in the outfield. I think he's a guy that there's a lot going on in your head to play defense at third base. And excuse me, if he could be released of all of that, stress-free by playing the outfield, and just focus on hitting, young man, because that swing is something else. I'm really looking forward to watching Addison Barger grow into, I keep saying an everyday big league outfielder, but I don't know. He's got to hit lefties. You have to, like a Tucker, these guys, right? They got to hit, left-handed hitters got to hit lefties to be everyday players. And I want to see him get that opportunity. I know it hasn't necessarily been great, but I'd still love to see him get that opportunity. The problem is, of course, you're doing this on a team now that's expected to win. Going into last year, the conversations were more about they have to win, or there's going to be some jobs on the line.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised, honestly, if he hits his stride offensively. He could make an all-star team, honestly, with that kind of pop that he has.
Yep.
We saw it in the playoffs. We really appreciate you joining us, Joe. I want to leave you with one more question here. We know, obviously, you have a busy schedule. If you can think back, we're both former players. I've just played up until this past summer, until my 19-year-old season. Christian's a former player as well. We both were pitchers at one point. If you can think back to Assumption High School in Windsor, Ontario, think back to yourself, say a 14, 15-year-old Joe Siddall. For the young listeners on this podcast that are maybe trying to make it in their baseball career and trying to think, how can I get to the next level? What sort of advice would you give to young baseball players in this generation?
I was a preparer. I'm still a preparer. And what that means is I like to be ready for the task at hand. Now, when you're a catcher catching game, you can do that, right? You can do your work, your skill work, your receiving, your blocking, to get ready for a game. You take your batting practice, do your stuff. I do it as a broadcaster. I do it in everyday life. Like I like to be prepared. When we're doing a show, I want to know what we're going to be talking about, where I want to go. Now, that doesn't mean you can't just fly by the seat of your pants sometimes, because you got to be able to do that too. But I think the most important thing, especially as a young catcher or a young broadcaster or a young student in school. I mean, I used to talk to kids like this all the time. If you've got a math test on Thursday, you probably shouldn't start studying Wednesday night, right? Like, and kids will always laugh at that, like you just did. But like, I'm being serious. And I think it was partially because of the way I had to do it. I had to kind of go over some material Tuesday. go over some more Wednesday afternoon, and then do more Wednesday night before this. Like I had to have all my ducks in a row to feel comfortable going in. So any exam I ever took, I'm not saying I was the best student in the world, but decent student, right? But that's what worked for me. But to me, if you're not going to be prepared, you're almost setting yourself up for failure. So I would say, especially those young ages, not necessarily the formative years, but pretty formative when you're talking about the rest of your life, that, yeah, preparation to me is everything. And I love the old line, luck is when preparation meets opportunity. Don't tell me I was lucky. I prepared for that moment and it came and you jumped on it. So that's the biggest thing for me. And obviously I was a quarterback in football. I was a catcher in baseball, two main sports. And preparation is so important, right? They're both kind of cerebral positions. So maybe that's why I was that way. I don't know. I probably should have taken a little stronger approach like that to my studies, but that's how it was in those two sports because they're both positions that demand that, right?
Love it. Absolutely love the message. I'll admit we fangirl a little bit when we hear your swing breakdown. So we love watching you on the broadcast. So listen, we really appreciate you joining us today. We really look forward to watching you in the broadcast booth throughout the season.
All right, guys, my pleasure. Thanks for having me. And spring training is right around the corner now.
Thank you,
Absolutely.
Joe.
Thanks for tuning in. Go Jays.